I'd like to address the question, what leadership theory is best? When you go through different leadership textbooks like Peter Northouse's Leadership or Gary Yukl's Leadership in Organizations, you're exposed to a ton of theories about leaderships. And what I want to do in this short video is address the question, what leadership theory is best? Now, in order to do this, we need to understand what a leadership theory is. So in this organization, in this illustration here, we've got an organization. And there's some leadership-related inputs. Those are things that leaders can do. They can be things in the environment that might affect an organization and the people in the organization. And then we've got some leadership-related outcomes. Maybe that's what we consider good leadership. Maybe it's how the leader responds to problems. Maybe it's how well the workers produce something, how well they do their task. Maybe it's how happy people are, or how good the relationship between the leaders and the followers are. It can be any of a lot of different things. And a leadership theory looks at some leadership-related inputs and describes how they reflect the leadership-related outcomes. And so that's what we call a leadership theory. Now, it turns out in real life that this whole concept of leadership is extremely complicated. The leadership-related inputs can be very, very broad. We could have all the leaders' different behaviors, whether whatever the leader does, maybe it's how they talk to people, maybe it's how they organize their life, their daily schedule, their desk. Anything that a leader does can be considered a leadership behavior. We can also be concerned about the leader's personality, the different personality traits that they have. Might be using a Myers-Briggs description, or it could be using different scales like in the Big Five personality theory. We might also be, some of the leadership inputs could be the leader's skills. What are the abilities that the leaders have? That certainly affects leadership. Could be the leader's attitudes and beliefs also that affect leadership. That's something that would be a part of leadership. And also a leader's relationship with coworkers. Those are all leadership inputs, and there's lots of different things that are involved in leadership, and it can get very complicated. Now, the leadership outcomes, those could include the followers' behaviors and any type of behavior that we want to look at. How cooperative are they? How well they do the work? How much work they accomplish? Maybe the followers' beliefs are what we want to use to describe good leadership, or the followers' abilities. We want them to grow and to be more capable of doing things. Maybe the followers' relationship with the leader is the leadership outcome that we're concerned about. Now, so there's tons of different things that we could consider as the outcomes of leadership-related outcomes. And to make this even more complicated, some of these leadership-related outcomes, such as the follower's relationship with the leader, that can also go back and become an input. So we can get these feedback loops going through this. So if we just try to describe the entire leadership process, it becomes extremely complicated. We've got dozens or hundreds of variables on this side, and dozens of hundreds of variables on this side, and it becomes a bit too complicated to think about coherently. So, a typical leadership theory limits what we look at. We look at one type of leadership-related input, maybe leadership behaviors, how relationally oriented the leader is, maybe how task-oriented the leader is, or maybe we look at the leader's abilities. How smart is the leader? Or maybe we look at the leader's personality traits and nothing else. And then, to have a theory, we only look at one type of leadership-related outcome. That might be employee ratings of how good of a leader they have. It might be the quality of their relationships. So, a leadership theory is just taking one type of leadership-related input and making a statement predicting how that's going to affect a given leadership-related outcome. And so these books that you study, they have lots of different leadership theories, all of which have different leadership-related inputs and leadership-related outcomes. And by realizing that we have these different types of theories, we can start saying, I wonder which one is best. Now, one of the nice things about having a simple theory that only looks at one type of input and one type of outcome is that the theory can be tested empirically. That means we go and collect data about leaders, looking at what type of input, how much task-related behavior, how much relationship-related behavior they put into something, and then we measure the outcome, and we can find out if they're actually related or not. So we come to the question, what is the best leadership theory? Well, to answer that, we have to answer two questions. First of all, does the theory describe a large part of the variation observed in the output variable? If we're looking at employee satisfaction, and that's our leadership output variable, does the leadership input variable actually predict, is it strongly correlated with the output variable that we're looking at? If it's not, if the relationships aren't significant, or if it just accounts for a very small part of the variation in the output variable that we're looking at it, then it's not a very good theory. A second question is, does the model use variables that interest you? If you're concerned about the leadership's personality, the leader's personality and what effect that has on leaders' attitude towards work, then maybe the leader's intelligence isn't going to be a very good theory to use, any theory that's based on the leader's intelligence. Or maybe if you're looking at work output, variables concerning the leader's relationships aren't going to be very relevant, so you don't want to use those types of theories. So we can conclude that all legitimate models, all models that really do predict something, and we have evidence that they accurately predict the variable that we're looking for, all these models are going to be useful in certain contexts depending on what we're looking for, depending on what we want to adjust in our own behavior, depending on what we want leaders to adjust in their behavior, or what kind of outcomes we expect them to have. These different models will be relevant. So we can't really say if there's just one best theory, because different contexts will require different theories. Now, it's true that theories like transformational leadership are really popular right now, and most leadership professors will probably say that's their favorite leadership theory. Or adaptive leadership is quite popular also, because that kind of fits in with the era that we're living in, this idea of having a positive impact on the followers. But if we're not concerned about having a positive impact on our followers, then they're not very useful theories. We could go to some other theory. So in answering the question, what is the best leadership theory, you need to focus on, well, what am I really interested in? What outcomes am I especially concerned about? And what theories address those outcomes?